A federal court has ruled that UberX will be subject to the same GST requirements as taxi services. The decision could have huge ramifications for other operators in the new sharing economy. Let's get more on this. Matthew Cridland from law firm K&L Gates joins us now. Matthew, welcome.
Good morning.
This is it's an area that is yet to be defined as far as the law is concerned, isn't it? Particularly the tax law. Let's take a look at the issue then,
Sure.
as far as those Uber drivers are concerned.
Yes.
What's their argument? Why shouldn't they be taxed GST?
Sure. So the principal issue is that small businesses aren't required to register an account for GST if their turnover is less than 75,000 Australian dollars. The one exception to that, of course, is if you're a taxi driver or limousine driver. You're required to register and pay GST from $1. And so the issue that arose once UberX commenced operations in Australia was whether UberX drivers were providing a taxi service and hence were required to register for GST and account for GST from $1 in the same way as the taxi drivers currently do. So of course, that was challenged by Uber.
Well, but as far as tax law is concerned, then,
Yes.
how do you define it?
Well, there is no specific definition of a taxi service in the GST Act. It just refers to taxi travel. And so, of course, the federal court, in reaching this decision, has had to look at what is a taxi service and does it actually capture UberX ride-sharing type services.
And those UberX drivers say essentially they've been singled out differently from the tax treatment that affects truck drivers and messengers, for instance.
That's right. So I think the UberX would say that they're not taxi drivers. The principal difference between a taxi and an UberX, of course, is that UberX drivers are not permitted to stop at a rank or to accept passengers who might try to hail them on the street. Those are services that can only be provided by licensed taxis. So UberX would say that they're not actually providing a taxi service for those reasons. However, the ATO has been assessing them as taxi drivers, and of course, the federal court this morning confirmed that that's the correct treatment.
Matthew, this throws up a whole number of possibilities and inconsistencies perhaps in the law as far as the sharing economy is concerned. It's not just Uber drivers. For instance, we talk about with the rental of a house and Airbnb as one of the parts of that sharing economy.
That's right.
What's the application there for the law?
So the issues that were decided in this particular case are specific to the taxi and ride-sharing industry. However, you're quite right that a lot of GST issues have arisen for the sharing economy more broadly, including in respect of accommodation sharing. The ATO has issued separate guidance in relation to that, and their view is that accommodation that's provided in homes is not subject to GST, but there's different GST considerations that arise.
Yeah, because it depends on the circumstances, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What someone could essentially book their house out for months on end.
Yep.
In that case, would they still not be subject to GST
That's right.
or any sort of tax?
They certainly wouldn't be subject to GST, the argument being that effectively it's equivalent to residential rent, which is not subject to GST. But I think you're dead right that this type of case is emblematic of the problems that arise with disruptive technologies and business models. And we've seen the same thing in relation to Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and the GST treatment of those. So Scott Morrison last year announced that the GST Act would be amended to address those issues.
So is it fair to say the law is struggling to keep up?
I think it is, yes, that's right. It's a real challenge for both our regulators and also our policy setters, and as well for business, of course, to try and keep abreast of all of these developments.
Do you take a look at overseas, perhaps the US
Yeah.
and in Europe, and examples there and the course that they're taking at the moment?
Absolutely. So certainly, particularly with global products like Uber. I mean, Uber's obviously available in many jurisdictions. So the issues that we're facing and the challenges that we're facing are not unique to Australia, but obviously we need to consider them through the lens of local tax laws.
I mean, potential problems that have developed, for instance, in those other jurisdictions. You've obviously poured through all of that, trying to look at the different permutations, if you like. And as I said, this must be ongoing, trying to move with the times so rapidly.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So there's a lot of trends, and obviously the government is pushing an innovation agenda, and so I think it is incumbent upon the government and also the regulators to try and keep abreast of all of these fast-paced developments and ensure that our tax laws are not hindering development.
Fair to say it keeps you in work?
Absolutely.
Matthew Cridland, thanks very much.
Thank you, Andrew.